infinite complacence, people went to and fro of the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Welcome to another episode of Into the Fray. Before we get to my chat with Mark, I would like to thank Hayes for calling in his strange experience. If you have a quick sighting or encounter that you would like to share, call the Into the Fray hotline at 702-714-0094. If you need more than the allotted 3 minutes, just call right back and pick up where you left off. Again, that's 702-714-0094.
Hello, Shannon. This is Hayes. I had talked to you or emailed about my apex predator story. It happened years ago, and I kicked myself for never going back to look for any pups of fur or what have you. But the story is, my ex-wife, she had got off work around 11:30 and usually got home around midnight. So we hung out for a little bit, but we generally went outside to smoke a cigarette, and we had a dog named Butters, who was a Australian collie, like a dingo dog. And Butters would always run outside as soon as we lifted up the garage door down the front little hill across the street to the big bush to check his P-mail. Well, that night was a little different because we lifted the garage door, and from my memory, it was a real silent night. Butters took a couple steps out. Its mane just went straight up, and he started to growl. Like I said, he always ran across the street to check his P-mail at night, and we let him. But that night, he was on guard. Butters started growling and then coming across the street from the neighbor's bush, which had to be inside 120 yards. There was this guttural speaking. Didn't really make sense. Kind of sounded like they were underwater. And it woke up two birds. And the birds started chirping above it. One would chirp, and then the other would chirp. And the one would chirp, and the other would chirp. And this was only a matter of a couple minutes, the birds started moving, which meant that they were following whatever predator it was down through thicker bushes and raspberry bushes and just things that were never kept, massive weeds. To make a long story short, we've had bears that have come through Lebanon County. There's pictures of it downtown at the Rite Aid in the parking lot. So who knows what it was.
On this episode of Into the Fray, I welcome Mark on with me, and he is out in Connecticut, but he has also spent quite a bit of time in Roswell, New Mexico, and it sounds like he has quite a few interesting encounters, experiences, and stories to share. Mark, welcome on the show.
Shannon, how are you? Thank you for having me.
I am doing excelente. So before we hop in to these experiences, I always like to ask, before you had your first one, were you into this stuff? Or did you already watching, did you like scary movies or paranormal stories?
Well, it's very funny you asked that. You're the only one that's ever asked that. My first experience with anything paranormal was at 2.5 years old, and I remember it vividly till this day. So this is something that's been going on my entire life. My grandmother, who was from Austria, she was considered a witch when she came over here because she could tell fortunes and stuff. She had the same ability that I guess it's hereditary or something, but I have. Let me tell you, it's more of people go, it's so cool that you can see ghosts and you can feel them. It's kind of a pain in the neck, really. It's more of a hassle most of the time because they follow me around. I'm really not into the paranormal. I'm more into like cool cryptozoology stuff like, Dogman and Bigfoot, and I love UFOs, and that's why I lived in Roswell for a while. But it's these damn ghosts that constant. So my first experience with a ghost was, like I said, I was 2.5 years old, and we lived in a house that my father was born in, and his dad was from Italy, and his father died when he was 12 years old, when my father was 12 years old. So when I was born, I remember we'd come home. My father worked second shift, so he was working nights. So it would be me and my mother and my grandmother, and we'd come home at night, and I'd walk into the kitchen, and I'd see this man sitting in the corner of the kitchen near the wall, kind of like he was sitting there trying to like keep warm or something. It was weird. He had a weird, I don't know, the way he was sitting. So I'd always say, "Oh, there's that man again. Hey, Mom, there's that man." My mom would look. She said, "There's no man over there." I'm like, "Yeah, there's a man. He's sitting right there." So this would go on, and I'd be in the living room, Saturday mornings, and I'd be watching cartoons or whatever, eating graham crackers and milk. I remember this. And the man was sitting on the couch, that same guy. And so I offered him some, crackers, and he just kind of like, "No, I'm good." So I tried talking with him, and he would just nod a lot. He wouldn't talk. So when my dad got home, I told my mom that the guy is there again and stuff. And so my dad got home, and my mother said to him, "Listen, he's seeing things. He says he sees a man sitting there all the time." So my dad pulled out a picture where he found it, I don't know, of his father. And they showed it to me, and bingo, that was the guy. And he had died back in the 1930s. Okay. So there was no way that, the minute they showed me the picture, I knew who the guy was. So this went on as I was growing up, I would be able to sense things and know there was like a spirit around me or something like that. And I kind of shrugged it off because it was like, oh, here we go again. So my grandmother had told me, she goes, "You got it. You have the same thing that I have. They're going to bother you your whole life." And she said, some people think it's a blessing, and to some people it is, but some people think it's not, and it's more of a pain. And that's exactly what it is to me. So as I got married, grew up, got married, and we lived in this house in Meriden, Connecticut, in the center of Connecticut. And we had 3 kids. Well, when my kids were small, this house was huge. It was a beautiful Victorian house. I really loved it. I felt energy in there, but it was nothing bad. It wasn't malicious or anything like that. So, one night we had these huge rooms. The master bedroom was right off the living room, and you could open up the 2 big doors and make it one giant room if you wanted to. But we kept one side as our bedroom, and the other side is the living room. So we had one of the doors open. It was a Sunday night. It was around 10 o'clock at night, and we were in bed watching TV. And my wife turns over and says to me, "Hey, Alan," which is my son, and he was probably 5 at the time, 4 or 5 at the time. You know those plastic runners that you would put on a rug back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s? They had those little prickly things on the bottom of them. If
Yeah.
you turned them upside down, you step on it, it felt like a Lego. Well, we had just put carpet in the living room, and we put one of those big runners in from the living room door to the kitchen, the most traveled path, so the rug wouldn't get destroyed because we had kids. And my wife turned to me and she says, "Alan is just walked out of his room, and I think he's going to go to the has to go to the bathroom." So I'm like, "So what does that mean? I have to go help him?" And she's like, "Well, you have to turn the light on because he can't reach." So we heard him walk across the plastic and get to the kitchen door. When he got to the kitchen door, I was getting out of bed, putting my robe on and stuff. And he put 2 hands, his one hand on one side of the door and one hand on the other side of the open door frame, leaned into the kitchen, leaned back, turned and looked at both of us, smiled, and ran into the kitchen towards the bathroom. So my wife goes, "You better hurry up, get out there," So I get out of bed, go over into the kitchen, into the bathroom, and there's nobody there. There was no possible way he came back through because there's only one way from the bathroom to the living room. There was no one. We saw the little person. We both saw him, and he just wasn't there. So that was okay. That was a little bit weird. And then one night we were in bed, and all of a sudden my son is screaming, and I mean screaming, top of his lungs. And we rush into the room. He's sitting in the middle of his bed. He had blood on him, on his face and his hands, and his bureaus were all knocked over. His TV was thrown across the room. He was 5 years old. There's no possible way he could have done any of this. There was blood on the walls. We don't know where it came from. He wouldn't talk. He was just lost his mind. We cleaned everything up, and there was no blood on him. It was not coming from him, okay, which was bizarre. So we're like, okay, this is strange, and we got to do something about this. Then again, we saw apparition. Well, I saw the apparition come through the kitchen and into the side wall towards the door there. The man just walked, and he was period clothing, probably early 1900s. I've never saw this person before. It was definitely a man. Walked through the kitchen and through the wall. And that was just like, holy cow, we got something going on here. So we actually talked to, I knew Ed and Lorraine Warren, and she was doing one of her things that they did. They had these little talks in one of the hotels that I worked at, because I'm a chef. And, I brought her in, and, so during her whole thing that she did, and, it was really cool. I watched the whole thing, and they were really, really nice people. So they ended. And she came up to me and she goes, "You really need my help, don't you?" And I'm like, "How did you know?" She goes, I could tell. It's all over you. There's something wrong." And I said, "Yeah, it's my house." They came to the house for me. They exercised it, I guess, if you want to call it. We didn't have any problems after that, but we definitely didn't want to stay there anymore. So we left. So we moved to another house in the same city. So, me being a chef, I worked in a lot of places, a lot of old buildings. And I had this one job. It was called the Hanover House. And so I was working in the kitchen. I was the only guy in the kitchen. It was a small restaurant bar type thing. And I'd be working in the kitchen, and down behind the kitchen, down the hallway, there's a hallway in the back of the kitchen that went to an office, probably 20 feet down. And the owner said, "Don't go in that office down there. It's just don't ever go in there." I said, "Okay, no problem." There was no door on it. So, I didn't go down the hallway anyhow. It was kind of creepy. So I'd be in the kitchen cooking, and I'd hear, "Hey, Mark." I look around, and there's nobody in the kitchen. I figured, someone out in a restaurant or bar area was probably calling me. So I go through the doors. I said, "You guys calling me?" And they're like, "No." Okay. I walk back in the kitchen and doing some work, and it's, "Hey, Mark." And I'm like, wow, what is going on? So I went back out. Like, "You guys screwing around with me?" And they're like, no, we didn't call you. Okay, the third time, go back in the kitchen. I hear, "Mark," and it's from the hallway. That was it. I left the job. I couldn't go back there. The owner had told me that there was a murder-suicide in that office in the back there probably 20 years earlier. And that's why he says, "I never go in there. It's kind of creepy." So whether they were calling me or just trying to get my attention, yeah, probably, and they got it. So, I got out of there. This whole feeling thing that I get, and then I see them. Another restaurant I worked at here in Connecticut was a very old building. It was built by a very rich family that imported ivory from Africa and stuff to Connecticut to make piano keys. So back in the 1800s, ivory was a huge thing here, and the town is called Ivoryton. So, hence the name. So all this ivory was coming into this up the Connecticut River, and into Ivoryton. So they had this huge mansion, which is now a restaurant. Well, it wasn't a mansion, then it was turned into an inn, which it still is an inn, and a very, very Michelin star restaurant. Really, really cool place. Really creepy. When I walked into the place, the minute I walked into the lobby, it's old Victorian style. Everything in there is old. I mean, absolutely gorgeous, but old and dark. And I walked past this dining room, and there was a man standing in the back of the dining room. And it was just like he was just watched me. So I walked into the room, and he just kind of like faded out, faded to black. So I'm like, okay, this place is haunted too. Great. I talked to the owners, and the owner said, "Oh yeah, we have spirits, but I don't believe in that stuff." And I said, "Well, you should, because there's a couple here." You'd go into the rooms upstairs, you'd go walk past the rooms, there was no one in the room, and you would hear talking inside that room. No one was there, no one was sleeping there. I knew who was in what rooms because we had a delivered room service and stuff like that. There was no people in the room. You'd open the door, there's nobody there. Okay. The bar was absolutely gorgeous with copper and just just beautiful, absolutely beautiful place. And there was always a guy that I would see from the corner of my eye sitting at the center of the back of the bar in the back there. But he wasn't dressed in period garb. He was dressed like we would dress nowadays. I'd see him in the corner of my eye, I'd turn to look at him, he'd be gone. So this happened more than once. I finally asked the owner, I'm like, what? I keep seeing this guy in here. He goes, which stool? The one in the center? I said, yeah. He goes, oh, a couple of years ago at a Christmas party, a guy had a heart attack on that seat, on that stool right there. And I said, well, he's still there. You know, there was another place I worked at, which was absolutely amazing, the Captain Daniel Backer Inn. It's haunted by the captain himself and his niece, who was 7 years old, and her name was Ada. She died of scarlet fever in 1772 or something like that. He was a captain, and he did a lot of importing of goods and stuff like that. In the basement, he would hide slaves. Okay. So he had this, the guy was a racketeer. So he was into everything just because he was a sea captain and he had access to all kinds of different goods and stuff like that. But he would hide slaves in the basement and move them along, you know, further up north and stuff, like kind of like the Underground Railroad type thing. But the place is haunted by him and his niece. Her name is Ada. She used to grab my chef coat, in the back of my chef coat, and tug at it all the time. You turn around, she wouldn't be there. She'd follow patrons into the bathroom. We had a unisex bathroom up on the third floor, and as you walked in, you'd close the door, and there was a big mirror on the side, and you would walk past the mirror, and people would see a little girl following them. They would lose their minds, run out of the place. There was one guy and his girlfriend or wife, I don't know, they were sitting it was a two-top, and they were sitting facing each other. And there was another table 3 or 4 feet over, another two-top, and that couple was facing each other as well. Well, a server came and grabbed me, and she goes, "Chef, something's going on in the dining room, and you got to check it out because I know that you would know what's happening." I'm like, "What?" And so I go out there and I'm looking, and one of the guys at the two-top, the first one, he's like white as a ghost, and he's just staring at his girl, at his partner, and she's kept asking him, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I'm watching, and he says, "Listen." He goes, "Hold on a second," and he turns to the table next to them and looks at the gentleman and says, "Your name is David, isn't it?" And the guy said, "Yeah." "How do you know?" He said, "I don't know." He says, "There's a little girl. She told me her name, and it was Ada, and she told me that I had to go and say hi to you because your name is David, and she likes that name." Well, I was like, I was like, holy cow. The guy, both of them were stunned. They just sat there like, what? So I went over to the guy. I'm like, did this just happen? He said, "Chef, there was a little girl. She came to my ear, in my ear, and said, 'Say hi to the man next to you. His name is David. I like that name.'" Bizarre. It was one Thanksgiving. We were, going to have a Thanksgiving meal there, about 700 people coming in. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm getting ready. And we had a cleaning service come, and they would clean the restaurant, all 3 floors, and, get it ready. And one of the girls come down, and she's like, "Hey, chef, can you tell the little kids upstairs to stop touching the windows and flipping the tablecloths over?" And I'm like, "What?" She says, "There's little kids, and they keep running around. It's 6:30 in the morning. There's no kids here." And I went upstairs. She showed me. She goes, "Look," brought me upstairs, and the bottom of the windowsill on the windows were little tiny fingerprints that they had just cleaned. Ada had this little thing that she would take the corners of the tablecloth on tables and flip them onto the top of the table. That was just her way of saying hi. She was a kid. She didn't do anything malicious except for once she followed me home. I had done that video with another chef, the restaurant road trip video. And the guy that was filming with me, Chef Plum, he dressed up his little girl, because she was 70 years old at the time, as Ada in period garb. And if you watch the episode, you'll see in the background a little girl kind of like wandering around. And he thought it was really funny to be, have his daughter dressed up like Ada and walking around the restaurant while we were filming. So I get done. filming. I come home, well, I get done, and the girls wanted to see the office because I had some stuff in there that belonged to Ada, some drawings and stuff. So the wife and the three girls came up to my office, and he was filming some scenes outside, whatever. So I brought him into the office, and I'm showing him all of Ada's little pictures that she drew and stuff like that. And on the wall, we had, it was a benefit for the Sandy Hook kids that were killed in Sandy Hook. And it was like a Christmas, like a strap that, you know, like reindeers would have on their neck with the bells on them. When we had that hanging on the wall, it was from one of the fundraisers that they had. And funny enough, that Chef Plum and his wife and three kids live in Sandy Hook, which is bizarre. So we get done in the office. I'm like, okay, let's go, girls. We got to go say goodbye to Ada and thank her for, letting her in, letting you guys into their house and stuff like that. So all the little kids are like, oh, bye, Ada. Thank you, Ada. Bye, Ada. So we're walking out the door, and those bells on the wall started shaking and rang. It was like the wife, I thought she was going to die. The girls just stopped in their tracks. The wife was like, oh my God. I said, it's just Ada saying goodbye. And it was so cool. That was really cool. So I get home that night, and my wife goes, oh, how did it go? I said, it was good. We filmed it, and it came out really well. And Plum dressed up his daughter as Ada. And my wife's like, what? And I said, well, he dressed her up like Ada, and she kind of like wandered around and while we were filming. She goes, don't do that. You're making fun of her. I'm like, I didn't do anything. I'm not making fun of this girl. That was him. That was Plum. He did this. So she goes, that's just not right. You shouldn't do stuff like that. So whatever. So the next, go look outside. I said, what? She says, go look outside. I looked out in the backyard. We have this gazebo. Okay. It was turned over on its side. Okay. And in the morning dew in Connecticut, if you live in Connecticut or Northeast, there's a lot of dew in the morning in the summertime. So everything is kind of like wet and kind of like a mist. Well, you could see where the dew is running down the shingles of the gazebo if it was standing up straight normally. But this thing was on its side, so you could see the dew coming down as it would normally on the shingles, but then take a sudden turn and gravity and pulls it down. So it was like it made a sharp turn when the thing was turned over. But there was no footprints on the ground. And if you walk on dew grass, you're going to leave footprints because it's, you're disturbing the dew on the grass, and it's just going to, there were no footprints. And I looked over to my wood pile, and all my entire pile of wood, which was probably a good cord and a half of wood, thrown everywhere, all over the yard. My fence that was facing, this is all like, and this is weird because it's all facing the ocean because I live on the ocean. I have a fence along the side of the driveway that was also knocked down facing the ocean. So I'm like, holy cow, I'm going to call the cops, some vandalism or something, I call a cop comes, and he goes, wow. He goes, someone really hates you. I said, yeah, but look, he goes, no, there's no car tracks. There's no tire tracks. There's no footprints. He goes, I don't get it. I said, well, neither do I. And I said, well, maybe, coyotes, we have a lot of coyotes. He goes, coyotes don't throw wood. He goes, they don't knock gazebos over. He goes, it takes quite a few people to push this thing over. I said, yeah, it does. I know. So, my wife said, you pissed off Ada. So the cop left, and I went back to the restaurant. And I talked to the owners, and I said, listen, and I told them what happened. And the owner, her name was Allie, and she's like, you pissed her off. She followed you home. You pissed her off because you guys were screwing around, making fun of her. I said, I didn't do anything. She's like, you better apologize because she has followed people home before. So I did. I apologized, and everything was better. Everything was better.
Yeah, I did watch the video. I appreciate you sending that along because not only, obviously I'm into the paranormal side of things, and I did notice Ada dressed up in the background, and then she ended up tossing the host of this episode into the water. Well, pushed him, not tossed him, but she pushed him in.
Ocean, yeah.
But I enjoy cooking shows as well, so it was nice to see you in your element and also see this beautiful inn, which, what is it, like over 250 years old or something, right? It's crazy.
In 1760, yeah.
Wow. Beautiful. What a place.
Old, really cool. Like we'd be in the bar downstairs and working on either cleaning bar lines or doing something, me and like one of the managers. And it's early in the morning because I'm an early bird. I get up there and I'm there usually at work at 6 or 7 in the morning. And me and him would be downstairs. He'd be putting stock away, and you would hear footsteps, big boots walking across the wooden floors upstairs in the dining area. There's nobody there but me and him. We know this because the doors are locked. And you would just hear the captain walk back and forth. He paced a lot. He paced a lot. I never saw the captain. I did see Ada. She was cute. She was a little girl. She played with a ball a lot in the stairs. She would stand like at a landing between the first and second floor, and she would play with her ball, and customers would try to come up the stairs, and they'd look and go, who owns that little girl? They need to take control of her because she wouldn't move, and she's playing with a ball. I'm like, there's no little girl. That's Ada. She's been dead for 200 years.
For anybody that's interested, I will link that YouTube
Yeah.
in the show notes for this episode. Anybody that wants to actually see the inn and see Mark doing his thing. Mark, do you know?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, at the time this was filmed, whoever owned the house at the time was not maybe embracing the haunting side of it, but was okay to let somebody come in and film and speak about that. Do you know if the owners now, I don't know how long ago that was filmed, but does each owner, do they embrace the haunted side of the inn, or?
They do. Yeah. So the owner is a girl. Her name is Allie. Her dad owned it before her. When she was 16, her dad died of a heart attack, and she kind of inherited everything. She has had taps come in there. To her, it's a pain. She gets it, and we all talk about Ada. We talk to her. You know, Allie's really cool about it. All the servers know. All the bartenders know. A lot of customers know. I think it's a big draw for them. Some people have experiences there. I have had many experiences there. You name it. Wherever I go, even right now, I'm in a brewery here in Branford, Connecticut. And the brewery was an old factory, late 1700s, early 1800s. It was part of the factory was torn down, and we put up this big brewery. Well, when I first started there, I felt right away there's something here. You know, I kind of felt it. I went upstairs. We have a celebration room upstairs, which is huge. It's like an events room, receptions and stuff like that upstairs. And it has a men's and ladies' room and a kitchen. And I went into the men's room one day, and there was a man, a young man. He was probably 25, 26 years old, and he had like workers' clothes on, kind of like a hat, kind of like mine. But he was dressed more like mid 1800s, 1900s, something like that. 25 years old. He had a beard, mustache, young man, slender. He looked at me and just vanished. And I was like, oh, of course, here we go. So now I know that there's somebody there. All right. So now it's like, I'm gonna go check on the guy. I don't know who he is, but I'm gonna go check on him. And I go into the bathroom, and boom, he would stand between the stall and the urinal. There's a little door there, and he would stand right there. Why? I don't know. But the minute you would walk in, you would see him for a split second, and he'd go. He was like shy. Right? He didn't want. I guess he was like a shy ghost, but he was there. Okay. So he would make appearances to me all the time. So now I'm like, okay. So I started talking to the bartenders, and I said, hey, you guys close up at night and stuff. Are you guys, anything weird here? And every one of them, oh my God, this place is so creepy, especially in the brewery. And I'm like, really? What goes on in the brewery? All these crazy noises and people talking and stuff. And I said, yeah. So you've seen anybody? No, we never seen. I've never seen a ghost. They're all no, we don't see him, but we could hear him moving tables around and stuff. Okay, it verifies it. So one morning, here it is, 6:30 a.m. I go to the brewery. I go into work. I unlock the place, turn the alarms off, and I'm walking in the brewery, which is huge, just a huge, huge room with the big fermenting tanks and stuff like that, stainless steel, just massive. And as I'm walking to the back, I see somebody sitting down at a table that's set up in the back near like where the master brewer hangs out, and he'll do his recipes and eat his lunch, and just a seat at a table. And I see a gentleman sitting there. So I keep walking towards him. He's still a good 50, 60 yards away. This place is huge, right? And I pass the brewmaster's office to my left-hand side, and I glance in, and I notice, I'm like, wait a minute, the door's locked. And I just turned the alarm off. There's nobody here but me. And as I looked up, the guy was gone. He was absolutely gone. Vanished from that chair. It was not the same dude that's upstairs in the bathroom up there. Totally different. So we had this guy that worked for us as a line cook. I brought him in. His name was Joe, probably in his early 40s. So Joe gets a phone call, which, everyone gets phone calls. Not a big deal. I don't make a big fuss about people on the phone unless it's crazy busy. So he's, I got to take this phone call. Yeah, go ahead. So he goes outside. He comes back in. He's like really, holy shit, something happened. I went up to him, what's the matter, man? He goes, I just got news. My dad just died of a heart attack. And I'm like, oh my God. I said, go home, go home. He's like, no. He says, my dad lives in Florida. He said, it's not going to do me any good to go home. I'm going to go home and think. I'd rather stay here and work. And I'm like, okay. I said, that's okay. That's fine. You can work. But, if you feel like, you want to go, just go. So, okay. So the next day, the guy shows up for work. And I was kind of surprised. I was like, okay, so it's Saturday. He wants to do his job. So I said, how you doing, man? He goes, oh, I'm doing all right. I'm okay. I mean, I didn't expect him to be chipper. His old man just died, So he's working, and I'm noticing he's just like sluggish, and he's just not really into it, but he's just wants to be there. So I went up to him. I said, dude, just go home. He goes, no, chef, I'm good. I just want to keep my mind off things. I said, all right, if you want to go, just go. So about an hour goes by. My sous chef comes up to me. He goes, hey, chef, he's got to go. He doesn't look good. And I said, yeah, he doesn't. I'm going to send him home. I said, hey, Joe, why don't you go home? He goes, yeah, chef, I'm going to leave. Thank you so much. I'll see you later. So, okay, take some time off. He leaves. 5 minutes later, he dies of a heart attack as he's driving home. The day after his dad died of a heart attack. We haven't seen that ghost since this happened. I don't know if he was trying to tell us something, but I'm still there. And this happened in July, end of July. And nobody has heard the ghost or anything. And I haven't felt him or the other one. I don't know if they were just trying to tell us something, but it was so bizarre. I mean,
Holy
the guy was only
smokes.
43 years old, man. Yeah. It's just weird how they follow me around. I could just name off place after place after place and put your show to 3 hours, but I don't want to do that. I don't know if you want to hear about some Roswell stuff, which is,
Before we go there, I just have a couple of questions about
yeah,
the experiences you've already mentioned. So, going back to the house that your father was born in,
yeah, yeah.
and this man in the kitchen, then you see him on the couch, and at first I was like, oh, maybe it's a residual. Obviously, it wasn't. He was highly interactive with you. Do you
Yes.
recall? I know you were really young, but do you recall if when every time you would see him, would he be in the same clothing?
He had a cane. He had this cool cane that my father found back in the 70s and gave it to me. And it was like a rosewood cane that I guess he had made, but he was dressed the same every time I saw him. He had a big handlebar mustache, right? Huge. He was a little short Italian guy. He was probably 5'4", and he had curly hair like Harpo Marx. Okay, right? Curly hair and a big handlebar mustache, and he was a short little guy. And he always wore the same thing. He had a vest on with an overcoat. They were dark. He had a shirt on, no tie, but he was dressed well. He was well dressed. And my father said, "Oh, my dad always dressed like he was going to church." So, okay, well, that's what he was dressed like, just like that. Yeah, it's funny because a lot of these ghosts or these entities or whatever it is that come around and bug the heck out of me, they're dressed pretty much in like early 1900s clothes. I don't know why. That's kind of weird. I never even thought of that, but it's weird. But a couple of weeks ago, me and my wife were sitting here at the table and we're eating dinner, and my wife's camera goes off. Her phone. We have security cameras all over the place, and her phone alerts her that there's somebody in our front yard. So she looks at her phone and she pulls it up, and there's an old lady. Now I have the same app on my phone. Okay, it didn't alert me. It only alerted her. Weird. She pulls up, and there's this old lady on the front walkway, like looking in to our living room window, like bending down and trying to. My wife's watching this and she goes, "There's a lady looking in our window right now." And I'm like, "No." I said, and I looked at my phone and my camera is fine, nothing. So she goes, "I'm going to go outside." I'm like, "You're not going outside without me." So we get flashlights and we go out there and there's nobody in the front yard. There's no one on the street. I mean, the camera is facing the front walkway, and it's a motion sensor camera, so it'll spin around and wherever it senses motion. But it's just facing that walkway, and there's nobody there. All right, there's absolutely no one there. I thought it might have been the kids next door or something. No, there's no one outside. We go back in the house, and like 2 minutes later, the dogs lose their mind at the door, like, "Ooh, maybe Jack's here." My stepson, my wife's son. So we're waiting for him to pop in the door. Nobody. The dogs are going absolutely bananas. Now I have this one dog. He's a husky. He's a Goldbarian, so he's a golden retriever husky mix. His name is Murphy, and he's laying right by my side here right now, whining because we want to pet him. But anyhow, he's barking, and we have a Rocco, who is a 110-pound chocolate lab, so he's not a force to be reckoned with. They're going crazy. Murphy walks from the kitchen through the house backwards, through the kitchen into the dining room, down the hallway, and into the bedroom backwards. Like, what the heck was that? Like, are you possessed? What are you doing? All right. So what? We go back outside. There's nobody there. Nothing. All right. There's something weird happening here. We sit back down. Dogs settle down. All of a sudden, a smoke alarm goes off in the bedroom. Not in the rest of. We have smoke alarms in every room in the house. There's nothing going. My smoke alarm in my bedroom is going off. I'm like, what the heck? I go into the bedroom. I pull it off the wall. It's still going off. There's no smoke in here, right? So I pop the battery out. What the heck? All right, it's fine. Go back. Finish dinner. My wife's going, "What's going on? Who followed you home now?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know. This is weird." So okay, she was watching one of her shows, and I said, "I'm gonna go screw around on my guitar for a while, so I'm gonna go play with the guitar." All right, so I go in the room, close the door. I'm playing the guitar. All of a sudden, it gets really cold in the room. And I look up, and my air conditioner is on. The air conditioner is on, but there's no lights on this. When you turn anything on, electric, you got all these lights that come on, and it tells you the temperature and fan speed, all that crap. Well, it was dark. It was just, and it's unplugged. But the AC is on. I took a video of it just because I was like, what the heck is happening? This is all in the same night. My wife comes in the room and she goes, "Why is the AC on?" And I said, "I don't know." And I said, "It's been on, but it's unplugged." And she's looking and she goes, "Oh my God." She goes, "What did you do, Mark?" I said, I don't know, but and since that night, we haven't had any other experiences here. This is only like a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, but today, well, what it could be is tomorrow is the 15th anniversary of my first wife's death, which happened in Roswell, which I will tell you the story next. So yeah, October 23rd is when she had passed away, 2009. So
Your current wife, does she normally
yeah,
have experiences? I mean, is that strange for her to, have her
she
app open, something's going on, but on yours there's nothing?
she doesn't have experiences like that. She had one experience when she was first married to her first husband. Maybe 2 years into their marriage, they were staying at an inn in Vermont, and they both woke up, and at the foot of their bed was like a lumberjack, and he was just standing there,
Oh
and then
my
he just
God. Did he
disappeared.
have an axe?
I think, yeah, I don't know, but she
Oh
said it was a lumberjack
God.
standing at the foot of their bed, and so this is my wife is not she's not into these things, but I'm after she married me, she is very now open to paranormal type things.
Yeah.
She doesn't do the Bigfoot thing like I do, and I love the Rougarou and stuff like that. UFOs, she didn't believe, and I kept on pounding that into her head. I'm like, listen, they exist. And then when 2017 came and all the Congress, came out and said, well, yeah, we've been tracking these things. So now she kind of believes in UFOs. I've told her that, since day one. I was the kid in the neighborhood that would run to the store and pay 35 cents, I think it was, to get a copy of the Inquirer or the Sun or the Midnight, or, just to get those stories about UFOs and Bigfoot and Bat Boy, the New York Daily News and stuff. So that was me, and that's how I grew up. The ghosts, they were a part of my life so much growing up that it just didn't. It's just like they're always there. Like I'll go to a cemetery. Okay, before Roswell. Okay, my dad, he had two jobs, and one of his jobs was part-time on Saturdays, was to put gravestones in the graveyard. He would sandblast people's, put people's names on them and sandblast them, and his job was to go and install a gravestone on the fresh grave. So I'd go with him because I loved the graveyard. There was a lot to do there, and there was always someone to talk to, even when no one was around. So he would showed me the family plot that he had bought, and he goes, "When I die, this is where you're gonna plant me, right here." Blah 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 blah. And, and it was weird because it had the giant gravestone with his name on it, Vaquito, the last name on it, and it was funny because I looked past the gravestone, and 2 rows up or 3 rows up, I noticed there was a fresh grave, and there was a marking on it, and the name. And I walked up to it and I looked, and it was a Vietnam soldier who was just killed in Vietnam. So this is 1971, something like that. Lilienthal. Okay, so that right there made a connection. We both have the same first name. Okay, so every time I went to the graveyard, I visited his grave. All right, and I would say, "Hey, how are you?" and stuff. Never saw him or anything, but I would go to his grave, and I was always like pulled over to his grave. Years go by, and I'm working at a restaurant, and there's this one guy that was a server, worked at the restaurant, and we hit it off, and he's a great guy, and we talked and we joked around, we kind of like had the same interests and stuff. And I said, what's your last name? And he goes, Lilienthal. And I was like, bing, holy cow, Lilienthal. I said, well, what a coincidence. I said, did you ever have like a relative or something that was in Vietnam? He goes, yeah, my brother. I said, really? He goes, yeah, he was killed in Vietnam. I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. He goes, yeah, his name was Mark. And I'm like, what? I said, wait a minute. Is he buried at St. Stan's Cemetery? And he goes, yeah, he is. So I'm like, oh, well, I've been visiting your brother's grave my whole life. And he's like, what? So I tell him the story. So he's like, well, thank you so much. Wow, that's kind of weird. Okay, well, it gets better. Now, fast forward, I have 3 kids now. My youngest one, her name's Asia, she was doing a book report. Now, we had moved out of Meriden, and we are up in Norwich now, near the Mohegan Sun Casino. Okay, so my daughter was in, I don't know, 7th grade, something like that. And she comes home. Now, we're like 50 miles from Meriden. She comes home and she goes, oh, for Veterans Day, we got to do book reports. Rah, 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 rah. I said, really? Well, what kind of book report? She goes, we have to pick out a soldier or someone that died in a war from Connecticut and do a report on him or her, whatever. And I said, oh. She goes, yeah, I got this one. He was from Meriden. His name is Mark Lilienthal. I was like, what?
Wow.
What? And she goes, yeah. I said, how did you get the name? She goes, well, my teacher had a bunch of veterans that were killed in the wars, and you would just go and pick one out of a bowl, and that's who you had to do a report on. And she goes, and I got Mark Lilienthal.
Oh my goodness.
You know what? Isn't that crazy?
That's so cool.
Absolutely
yeah.
bizarre, right?
Yeah, that's
right?
cool.
So this was in a house. Right, now here it comes, the craziness. This was in a house in Norwich, Jewett City type. When we bought the house, there's a crazy lady that lived across the street who used to paint submarines for the Groton boatyards, the shipyards there, electric boat. I think the paint fumes got to her. Anyhow, she'd come to our house all the time and go, oh, you bought Michael's house. Michael was such a good boy. Michael used to go grow. He used to do this. He used to babysit, blah, 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 blah. Michael, right? So 2 years of listening to this lady, Michael. So one day we're having a picnic, and she comes over to, sit down. She has a handle of scotch with her. Right? Oh. So she sits at the table and she starts this Michael stuff again. Oh, Michael never did stuff like this. Oh, Michael, I'm so happy that you live here. But Michael was such a good boy. And I just got sick of it. And I said, listen, Mary, who is this Archangel Michael you talk about? I bought his house. And she just looked at me and she goes, you don't know? And I said, no. She said, Michael Ross, the serial killer. This is his house. I'm like, what?
What?
There's this no way, yeah. So the selling point, what got me for this house was when we went into the basement, there was a jail cell kind of in the basement with a door, like a jail cell door. And I said, this is cool. I can put Christmas presents in here, lock it, the kids won't get at it. I'm buying this house. Really, this is no lie. So the backyard of the house, at the end of my backyard was a little row of bushes and was a parking lot for a Catholic school. And there would be kids out there constantly playing ball and playing around recess. So the balls would always be in my yard and I'd throw them back to the kids. I'm like, oh my God, Michael lived right here with all these little kids next door. He killed 23 women, okay, in the 70s. Buried them all within a mile and a half or something of my house.
Oh my God.
The basement door, wooden door from the basement to the hallway, the door was filled with huge scratches, like from mid door all the way down to the floor, like scratches, right? And I'm like, so I said to Mary, I said, oh, Michael had some big dogs. And she said, Michael never had dogs. He hated dogs. He liked animals, but he didn't ever own them. He hated dogs and he really hated cats. And I'm like, what? But what are all these scratches in the door? Well, he might have held some of those women down there. I don't know. That's just all right.
Wow.
So my wife at the time has a cat that got pregnant and had kittens. We had like 11 kittens running around the house, which was fine. I'm an animal lover. They're just kittens and they run around the house. Well, systematically, we would find a kitten dead. Like every other day, one with its neck twisted, one outside. How it got outside, we don't know, but it was in a bucket that was sitting on the porch with like 6 inches of water in it, and in the bucket drowned. How it got there, we don't know. But systematically, every one of these kittens died. Very strange. We'd find them on the floor dead with their head. It's bizarre. Now, we don't, that's not what we are. We were animal lovers. We're still animal lovers. We don't do stuff like that. That disturbed the hell out of me. So now we would start getting these cabinet doors, things would open, and I'd get these really weird feelings of someone walking past me. Okay. One day I was opening a can of cat food and I felt this coldness come right down my back. As I was opening the can, the cat went wild and just dug its claws into me. I spun my hand around the lid of the metal can under my fingernail and just tore it wide open. All right. So now I'm bleeding all over the place. The cat's going crazy, like something spooked it or something. I don't know. It was nuts. So, all right, all these weird things are happening now. Me and my wife went out one night and we had to go. We were an event that we had to go to. My youngest daughter was home alone. She was 16 years old at the time. And we get a phone call from her. And she goes, Dad, there's someone in the house. And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, there's someone in your bedroom. I'm like, what do you do? What? She goes, Dad, I came home. The doors were locked. I unlocked the door. I came into the kitchen. I looked, and there was someone staring back at me from the bedroom. I thought it was maybe Mom or somebody. And she said, then I realized it's a guy. And I said, is he still there? And she said, I can't see him anymore, but he was in the bedroom. The door was partially open. It was dark in there, but you could see the man with his glasses on. And I said, what did he look like? And she said, Daddy looked like Napoleon Dynamite. I said, get out of the house now. All right. Napoleon Dynamite. You know what he looks like, right? Google a picture of Michael Ross. Same guy.
Yeah, I have him pulled up, and he does have glasses, and in a way, he does look a little bit. I could see that resemblance. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Mark!
Right now, my daughter has no idea about what's going on. I mean, she knew Napoleon Dynamite, but she didn't know Michael Ross. So I tell her, I'm like, get out of the house now, just leave. She called the cops, and the cops came in. There was nobody there. All right, and so I said, we got to get out of this place. So now no one told us when we bought the house, there was no disclosure about this was an serial killer's house and blah, blah, blah. No one told us that. So when the realtor came in, to do all the stuff, and I told her, I said, listen, we got something to tell you about this house. I said, it was owned previously by Michael Ross. His mother owned the house. He lived here his whole life. He was a serial killer. He killed like 22 girls or something like that. And I said, we just want you to know. So if there's a buyer, I think you should tell them, because we weren't told, and it kind of freaked us out. Okay, so we told her that. She told, the place sold in less than a week.
Wow.
Kidding me?
Even
kidding me?
even showing that cell in the basement with the scratches.
Yes.
And wow.
Yes. Yes, that basement was so freaking creepy.
I
barely
bet.
stored anything down there because I thought it was cool at first, but then it was like,
You didn't put the kids' presents in there, Mark?
Nope, I didn't. I didn't.
Probably a good idea. Wow.
Yeah.
So it was said that he obviously built that for a very nefarious reason, but it wasn't. Yeah. They don't know for sure if any of the women were killed on property, or they just.
No, see, yeah, and so what? We figured that Michael Ross's spirit or something was killing these kittens too, because what Mary said, he hated cats. All right, but he never owned dogs, and he hated cats. So I'm like, is that weird? 11 cats, 11 kittens, like every other day you'd find a dead kitten somewhere.
So all 11 had been killed?
Yeah. All 11. Every last one. My wife was literally going absolutely crazy.
Oh, that must have been awful.
I was horrible. I mean, so yeah, like I said, we sold the house. Let's go. And that's when we moved. I said, you know what? You always, your nephew, who we kind of raised when he was a little boy, kind of brought him into our house because him and his mom and dad were just not a healthy environment. So we kind of raised him, and he moved out to Roswell, New Mexico, because that's where his mother's family is from, which was kind of cool. So I said, let's just get out of here. Why don't we go to Roswell? She's like, why not? I said, let's go. All the kids were grown. All right, they're married. Let's go to Roswell. So we go. And it was a cool joint. I mean, we went down there, and we went into a restaurant that I kept giggling every time we drove by it, because it was a big Italian restaurant called Pasta Cafe, and it was a sign out front that said fresh seafood, and I'm like, this is the desert, there's no fresh seafood in the desert. So we went in for dinner one night, and it was absolutely gorgeous. All right, there was wine bottles on the wall. It's just such a cool Italian restaurant. So the owner is walking around, and he's talking to tables, and he comes up to my table, and he starts talking to us, and we're talking. He goes, hey, you have an accent from, I don't know, New England? I said, yeah. I said, you have a New York accent. He goes, I do. He said, I'm from New York. I said, well, we're from Connecticut. No kidding. What do you do? I said, well, I'm a chef. Really? Takes me for a tour of the place, the executive chef. So along with the job came a house across the street, which was a really nice house. And there was no rent. It was part of the job. And so we had 2 bedrooms in the house, a living room, fenced in yard, about 5 acres, fenced in. So we took it. It was like, how cool is this? And that's when the weird stuff happened. I come home from work, and I'd get out of work at 11:30, 12 o'clock. Depends. Weekends, probably 1 o'clock in the morning. And when I'd come home, I'd walk across the street, come into the house, open the back door. Me and the dog would go out in the backyard, and he would play around, chase groundhogs and stuff, middle of the night. I'd have a beer. And one night, this light hits me, right? What the heck? It's like a light in the sky. It comes down and hits me, and I look, and it's a helicopter, but there's no noise. There's no wash from the propellers. If a helicopter is, 200 feet in the air, you're going to feel the downdraft of the wind of the propellers. There wasn't anything like that. It was just there, and it was they were shining a spotlight on me. I don't know what the hell that was, but I was like, time to get the dog in the house. Let's go. Go in the house. It left. We didn't hear it. You didn't hear anything. You didn't feel anything. It was definitely a helicopter. Definitely a helicopter. All right. So, okay, that was weird. And I, kept that to myself and didn't really say much about it. So another night, I come back and come home and do the same thing. I go in the backyard, dog is out, I got a beer in my hand, and I look at a telephone pole that's just across the street from my house. And I look above the pole, and it looked like something was fluttering above the pole. And I'm like, what the hell is that? What kind of bird is that? Now, if you ever look at the album cover from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the album called Lucky Man, there's a picture of a dove, and it's radiating all these little waves from it. Okay, and that's exactly what that looked like above the pole. And I'm looking at it going, is that on the pole? And I'm looking at it closer. I'm like, that's above the pole, way out in the distance. But where I was positioned, it looked like it was sitting on top of the pole, which it wasn't. So I'm watching this thing, and it's fluttering in the air. And we lived right off of Main Street, maybe 4 blocks from the NIMI, New Mexican Military Institute, to our north. I'm looking east at this thing. Now, we're on a bit of a rise, so if I looked south, you could kind of see where the city started, Roswell, floating. And it went south for a while, and then it stopped, and it's doing this whole radiant thing, like it's emitting some kind of weird fluttery type thing. And I'm watching this thing. All right, now it goes south for a minute, and then all of a sudden it takes a sharp right hand turn, and just super fast, and then just stops on a dime. And I'm watching it going, what the? And I call my wife outside, and she looks and she goes, oh my God, you saw a UFO. Ah, finally. Don't go telling anybody because everyone thinks you're nuts, Just don't go telling. I'm like, but look at it. So now the thing goes south, and it starts going towards Roswell International Airport. That's also where the military base is. That's where the Enola Gay was launched to drop the bomb on Hiroshima. So it's heading that way. Now, the military institute is to my north. The military base and the airport is to my south, a good 15 miles or so. And I'm watching this thing head towards the base. But in the meantime, it's doing this kind of a zigzag pattern, sometimes slow, sometimes like in the blink of an eye, but it would move. And it was like, what is going on here? I'm going to call the airport. So 1:00 in the morning, get on the phone. I call the airport and I get, I'm sorry, we're not receiving calls right now. The heck is that? Who doesn't, what are you talking about? So, all right, I'm going to call the NIMI, the institute, military institute, find their number. I give it a call. I'm sorry, we're not taking calls right now. What? Let's try the police station. I didn't call 911, probably should have, but I called their non-emergency line. We're not taking calls. What police station doesn't take a call 24 hours a day? I never heard of this. Now I'm like losing my mind, right? My wife's telling me, calm down, just take it easy, go to bed, just go to bed, right? So I slept on it. I get up the next morning and I'm like, I gotta find out what's going on. So there's across the street, a good, 500 yards from my house, diagonally, there was a guy who lived there who was a preacher, and he was outside. He's always doing yard work and stuff. So I started, I walked over towards him, and he said hi, and I said, hey, does anything weird happen here where you can't make phone calls? And he looked at me like he knew what I was talking about. He goes, oh, you're new to New Mexico, aren't you? I said, yeah. He goes, so how long have you lived here? I said, a couple months. He goes, yeah, things happen around here. Just, you shouldn't talk about them. And I'm like, but I tried to make a call. He goes, oh, you saw something? I said, yeah, last night. So I tell him it was no harm to anybody. Didn't hurt anybody. Why do you have to go telling anybody? So I'm like, that was weird. So now I go downtown and I talk to my friends. There was a guy down there who I had a hot dog cart down there that I was selling hot dogs on the side. It was great in front of the UFO museum. And so I made friends with everybody in town because not only am I the chef at one of the premier Italian restaurants, but I also sell hot dogs on the side, like the UFO festival and stuff. And so I started talking to all these people, like these business owners and stuff. And I tell them what I see, and they're like, yeah, this is Roswell. Just, let it go. This is Roswell. Let it go. No, I kept making a big stink about this. I said, this is bull. So I get a MUFON. I found their website, and I went on their website, and I got a hold of an investigator and sent him my story. I typed it up and sent it to him. He sent me a thing back saying, listen, just write a report out. Here's the official report, blah, blah, blah. Fill it out, send it to me, and we'll take it from there. And I says, cool. So I fill out the whole report, and I send it to him. All right. And a couple of days go by, and, I don't hear. He said he was going to call me back. I don't hear from him. So, okay, so now I'm going to call him. He let on his email, there was his phone number. So I dialed the number. And I get this recording saying, we're sorry, we can't make this call. This call can't be placed from the phone or something I was using. I'm like, what do you mean this call can't be placed? This is bull. So I tried it again, and I get the same message. This call can't be placed. All right. So now I send the guy an email. He gets back to me about an hour or so later, and he says, no, my number hasn't changed, and I don't know what you're talking about. He says, the phone is sitting right on my desk. I'm looking at it. And I'm like, dude, I tried calling you twice, 3 times, and I'm getting the same message that this phone call can't be placed. I did it with my cell phone. I did it with my landline. I can't call you. He goes, well, he says, I don't know what to tell you. He said, let me give you another number. So I got another number from him. Tried that. Same thing. This call can't be placed. And I'm like, this is crazy. All right. In the meantime, I'm like going crazy, talking to people, and my wife keeps telling me, just shut up, shut up, shut up. So I come home from work one day, and my wife is like in the kitchen, and she's sitting down at the table, and she's got this ice on the side of her, an ice bag in her hand. She's on the side of her head holding it, and I'm like, what happened? She goes, you're not going to believe this. I'm in the pool. Now, we had a small pool in the backyard, and she said she was in the pool, and out of the clear blue sky, a man in a suit walked up to her and said, keep your mouth shut, and punched her in the side of the face. I said, what do you mean? She goes, look in my face. It was clearly someone punched her in the side of the face. What the? I said, where did he go? She said, he walked up the hill. That's not cool. I call 911. And I said, I want to report, my wife got punched and this and that. Okay. And we'll send someone. Fine. So I go out on the front porch, and I'm sitting there. My wife comes out. We're sitting on the front porch, and this is no longer than 10 minutes, man. I'm saying 10 minutes at the longest. All right. A white Ford Expedition, I think it is. White Ford Expedition pulls into my driveway. Okay. And a guy on the passenger side gets out, and he's in kind of like a suit, not dressed like a cop. I had called the police station. He was not dressed like a cop at all. And he walks up to me and he goes, are you the one that reported this domestic disturbance? I said, no, there's no domestic disturbance. I said, somebody punched my wife. He goes, I can see that very clearly. And I said, well, yeah, I called the police station. He goes, well, this domestic, who wants to make the complaint? And I'm like, it's not a domestic. I didn't punch. He goes, you should keep your hands to yourself. And I said, I didn't punch anybody. And he goes, well, you got a beer in your hand. What are you, drunk? And I'm like, I had just opened this beer, man. Come on. He goes, you know what? Why don't you both go inside and forget about all this crap? He said, and keep to yourself. And I'm like, what are you doing? And this guy was like very rude. He took control of the situation immediately, which was very bizarre. So he gets into the passenger side of the truck. And as they're driving out of the driveway, now you couldn't see the driver very well because of the sun glare on the windshield. They pulled into the street and made a turn backwards. As they did, the driver was very visible to both me and my wife, who were stunned, standing on the porch. And she looks at the driver and goes, the guy driving the truck is the guy that punched me. I'm like, what? And they take off. All right? What the So, all right, this is crazy. Now we can't even call the cops. Whatever. A couple days go by. I come home from work again. My wife is in the living room disoriented with her knees sliced up, her knees, both knees. She always wore shorts. She's in the desert. Her knees are cut up. And I'm like, what is going on? She's like, get out of this house. Get out of this house. My husband's going to come home. And I'm like, what? What are you talking? She goes, get out of the house. Get out of the house. My husband's going to come home. He'll kill you. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, what is I left the house. I'm like, what's going on? Is she losing her mind? What the heck? So about 10 minutes later, I walk back in the house and she's like normal again, but she's sitting there. And I'm like, are you okay? And she goes, no, I heard somebody come in the front door. And I got, and the next thing I knew, I was on the floor in the kitchen. Look, I broke a glass. I cut my knees open. And she goes, and I'm dizzy. I don't know what's going on. I said, was someone in the house? She goes, I thought it was you, but I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't? She goes, I don't know. It's just, I blacked out or something. And now the date of this was October 13th, okay, 2009. Okay, so she's acting really weird, like like very very almost to a state that she was drugged. Just weird. I'm like, are you okay? No, I'm not okay. I said, okay, so let's call a doctor. Let's go get you checked out. Okay. So we get her checked out, and the doctor said she was hit pretty hard, and I'm like, I don't understand this. So she's not herself at all. This is October 10th. Okay. Now, as we progressed, she started getting the next day after day after day, it got worse and worse. Where she was like, almost a super depressed mode, just super depressed, very quiet, very lethargic. That's not who she was. And I'm like, there's something going on here. Well, so October 23rd, 10 days later, we were sitting on a couch watching whatever, SUV, whatever, crime car, whatever, cop shows. She died of a brain hemorrhage right next to me. Bang. Like, so so I'm like, she just died. So I call 911 and I said, my wife just passed away. I don't know what the hell's going on. Blah, blah. My house gets swarmed by all these people, nurses, fire department, cops. All right. So they come and pronounce her dead. And they're now the cemetery, the mortuary send a vehicle too to bring her body. So they come in, they put her in a bag, and they put her on the stretcher and everything. And they take her out, and I'm like bewildered. It's like you got hit in the face with a shovel. It's just like I don't know what the hell's going on. My wife just died. All these people are in my house. They're leaving. They take her body, and they put it not in the mortuary vehicle, but in a white Ford Expedition in the back of that. The same car. I don't know if it's the same exact car, but the same exact kind of car that those two guys were in 10 days earlier. They brought her to the funeral home, and it was weird because I went down there and the funeral director kept saying to me, okay, so we're going to cremate her. I'm like, whoa, cremate? You're not cremate. What do you mean cremate? Yeah. I'm going to take her back to Connecticut. Yeah, you can take her back to Connecticut, but we'll cremate her first. And this and that. I said, no, there's no cremation. She didn't want to be cremated. I'm going to take her. He goes, you know how expensive it is to take body back? Blah, 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 blah. And he's going on and on. I'm like, whatever. He goes, well, we can't do anything until the coroner makes the official announcement, has to do whatever the coroner does. Now, in New Mexico, apparently there's only one coroner for the whole state. So literally day after day, I'm calling the funeral home and they're like, no, she hasn't come here yet. The coroner hasn't come here yet. I'm like, what is taking so long? This is bull. Her birthday is October 30th, the day before Halloween. I said, it's it was like the 28th now. I'm like, her birthday's in a couple of days. I don't want her buried. I don't want her buried on her birthday. All right, we got to get something done here. And so finally the next day they said, well, you can come pick up her ashes. I'm like, her ashes? What do you mean? Well, she was supposed to be cremated, right? I said, I never said that. Well, her ashes are here. So now, I don't know. I don't know. What do you make of that? I mean, they they cremated her without. Why were they trying to hide evidence that she was killed or something? I don't know, but there it is. That's what happened to her. And because I left New Mexico, And it was just like, well, they shut me up, didn't they? So here I am back in Connecticut, and it's been 15 years, and I haven't seen those guys, so I think I'm okay.
Well, and also the whole time you were there, the locals were
Yeah.
telling you, anybody that you tried to tell what you were seeing
Yeah.
and experiencing, they're
Yeah.
all like, nope,
Yep.
zip it up, Mark,
Yep.
don't talk about it,
Yeah.
like they all
Exactly.
knew.
Exactly. Barbara, who owns the UFO museum, I knew her. I used to sell hot dogs in her parking lot, and she was even like, just don't even bother. Just keep. She says, Mark, it's not worth your time and effort. Well, I don't know. What did I see? I didn't see really. What the hell? It was a thing in the sky. It wasn't like friggin' aliens came down or anything like that I saw. I saw a thing in the sky, but I was inquiring about it, and I guess I was a little bit too pushy with it, with my inquiries. It was crazy. And so two or 3 days after that I had received my wife's remains in this little box, I'm in the living room with my dog, and I'm making plans to come back to Connecticut. I call my kids. I'm like, Mom is dead, and they're like, you got to come back to Connecticut, Dad. You got to come back. I'm like, all right, whatever. And I says, you know, I hang up the phone with my daughter, and I was talking to my dog Nathan at the time, and he was a good boy. And I said, Nathan, I wish I knew if someone killed her because it's just so bizarre. Right after I said that, the fan lights, those three little hanging lights on the ceiling fan. Well, two of them exploded. Like, wow, if that's not a message, was it from Lori? It might have been. I don't know. But the two lights exploded. Boom, boom, just like that. Right after I said that. Coincidence? Could be. I don't know.
Well, I'm so sorry,
I don't know.
Mark. I mean, that
Yeah.
is terrible. I mean, to
Yeah.
have somebody walk up and hit her like that, and then 10 days
Hit her.
later she's gone.
And then when she said that she thought someone was in the house, and she was like all
Yeah.
disoriented. Her knees are all cut up. Well, did someone come in and try to? I don't know. I don't know. I don't
Well,
know.
and for her to say to you, "Oh, you have to go. You have to go. My husband's going to be here." I mean,
Right.
it's so strange.
Right. And I'm like, what is going on? And I walked out of the house, and I waited like a couple minutes, 10 minutes maybe. And I walked back in. She's like, oh, you're home.
Do you think
And
that
it
could have
totally,
been some kind of a side effect of some kind of the swelling or after
I
being
don't know.
hit? But I mean,
Yeah.
of course, did you ever figure out how she would have scraped up her knees in such a way? Like,
She had
was she
broken,
outside?
no, she was in the kitchen, and there was a broken glass. It looked like a
Oh,
regular, like a water glass or something. If someone hit her or snuck up, did she? I don't know. But her knees were both knees were cut up. She had no idea who I was at first. She said, I thought you were home earlier. And I'm like, I'm home now.
mm.
And she goes, I could have swore you were in the house. So was there someone in the house? I don't know. You
Jeez.
know?
So this helicopter, now it was
Yeah.
spotlighting you, but you
Yep.
could still see that it was in the shape of a helicopter. You could see the
Yeah.
rotors on the
Yeah.
on top
Yeah.
and at the
Because,
back.
yep, absolutely. No markings on it. No markings whatsoever. It was definitely a helicopter.
A
It
black
had a
black
spotlight,
helicopter?
black helicopter, had a spotlight on it, and they hit me with that spotlight. I'm like, what the frick is going on with this? Why? And I'm standing there, and I got a beer in my hand. I got the dog, and I'm like, I think it's time to go in. And we went in the house, and the light went off, and I saw it. It just went away. Just went away. But there was no noise. There was no noise. There was no draft. There was no downdraft from the rotors. Nothing. Nothing. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. Everyone would have heard that damn thing. It was nothing. It was so bizarre.
So before I let you go, can we zip back to the Warrens really quickly?
Sure.
He might have thought this was coming, right? Because I find that fascinating that you actually had the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine, come into your home, your personal
Yep.
home, and they did what they do.
They did some prayers. We said some prayers. I'm really not, even though I'm Catholic, I was raised Catholic. I'm not a religious person at all, but they did their prayer thing, and they had the holy water stuff. We had a priest laugh at me, like before the Warrens came out. I talked to a priest, and he kind of laughed at me. He wouldn't even like, yeah, well, that's just craziness. Don't worry about it. It's like, whatever. So Ed and Lorraine they were so, Ed was such a cool guy. Ed was like, if you ever watched the old show Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. That's all I need to hear. That's exactly how Ed was. All right. Lorraine was very pleasant. She was such a nice lady. We had dinner together and stuff. She was such a nice lady.
But
And yeah, they did.
but
Yeah,
in relation to, I mean, you've seen the movie The Conjuring, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah.
they're featured heavily in there, and their process in that movie. How accurate is that to their actual process?
Okay, so what they did in the movie and what they did in my house were similar to some points, but not. Mine was about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I went through the story. We went through from room to room. They blessed the rooms, said some prayers and stuff like that. It was not really like The Conjuring. I mean, that's very accurate. Now, Tony Spira is their I believe it's their son or their son-in-law who now runs the museum and stuff for them down in Woodbridge. And he was at one of their shows that they did, and he runs it all now. He wasn't at the house though. This was before he got involved. So it was back. What year was this? 94, 93? No, 92, 92, I think. Yeah.
And so then Lorraine would go through the house, and she was just kind of in her quiet state and just essentially
Yep.
listening or seeing what she could
Yep.
feel. I
We
mean,
went
she
into.
had The Shining just like you have The Shining.
Yes.
So
Yes. She's got it much better than I do. She's clairvoyant. She's just an amazing woman. She knew exactly that I had an issue before I even said it. I mean, we could both kind of see auras because she had, I had let her in on what goes on with me, and she says, "Can you see the aura?" And I said, "I can." She goes, "That's very important that you. That's a very important thing to have to see auras. It's a good judge of character." And you know what? It really is. And her aura was nice. Her aura was it was uh, almost a light, a pale white, a pale pink aura, and it was just a calming. She was just so calming to be next to. Ed was the same guy, but he was more of a gruffer type guy. But he was very nice, very pleasant, and he was strictly just the facts, just the facts. That's what he was. But he was, and he talked the same way. "Oh, just want to do this, just a fact, guys, just a facts." But yeah, it's close to what they did in The Conjuring. Not, not verbatim at all. I believe every house or every haunting or every situation is different, and I really think that I had opened a door up somehow. I was into a lot of this Egyptian stuff, and I was doing, like we had trouble dolls, and those things were trouble, stuff like that. And I think I was screwing around with some old Egyptian magic, you want to say. I had a friend who owned, as a matter of fact, the guy that owned the Hanover House, the place I worked at. His father was an art collector or some kind of a collector, and he had, believe it or not, the guy had that came to the United States in 1900. Everyone that owned the book before him it was bound in human flesh. Everyone that owned the book or had possession of the book had a signature in the front when you first opened the book, signed the book, and dated it. It came to the United States Christmas Day in 1900. Before that, it was all over Europe, dating back to the 1700s, which was crazy. And I think that he had brought the book over to the house, and I think that that had something to do with it too. That book was just pure evil. It was bound in human flesh. It was so creepy. He sent it off to Yale for a while, and I remember he told me it took about 6 months, and they got back to him and said, "You have a medieval transcript here. We don't want anything to do with it, but if that's your collection." But it dabbled. Some guy that spoke Latin, read Latin, was kind of deciphering the book at one point that I'd heard from the owner, Terry. And he said the guy was telling him that this book teaches you, it's like a book of magic. He said it teaches you how to take a cup or a glass or whatever and move it from one point to another without touching it. So it was definitely a book of spells and a book of just, and it was, the minute I saw the book, I was like, I cringed. I got like these goosebumps. And Terry goes, "Do you ever see anything like this?" And I'm like, "No, I really don't think I want to."
did you
So he
touch it
told
at
me what
all?
it was. And yeah, that was a mistake. Yeah, I did touch it. And I kind of
Mm.
like flipped through pages, and it was like, it was just not. It was, the feeling I got when I had that book, it was just so, it made my skin crawl. It was just creepy, just not right at all. And I'm like, "Terry, man, why don't you get rid of that thing?" Ended up he was killed. He lost his mind. I don't know what the hell happened. He beat up his girlfriend and tore out her eye and ended up in jail and was killed in jail. I believe that definitely that book had something to do with it. I don't know where it
Yeah.
is now. I don't want to know where it is. I don't care where it is. It's not near me.
I don't blame you a bit. Yeah, I would imagine even just being in the presence of something like that could be a
Yeah.
very dangerous thing. Imagine you have a book like that, and thank goodness you weren't living at Michael Ross's house still, and then that
Oh
book
no.
showed up. That's like compounding something that's already very compounded and volatile, right? I mean, my
Right.
gosh, after you've been through a
Yeah.
lot of stuff, Mark. I mean,
Yeah.
I thank you for
Yeah.
sharing all of
I
these
mean, I can
things
go
with
on
us.
forever, but this is the stuff I wanted to share with you.
I
You know.
appreciate it so much. I'm so sorry about your wife though. I would be I
Yeah.
can't you must just it must just be such a helpless feeling because you're kind of going, "No, something has happened with her." And then
Yeah. No one would listen.
it looked like the
No one
same
would listen to
people
me.
that did it showed up to take her. And then
They
they cremated her.
decremated her without. I'm like, oh, you can. He says you can come pick up her ashes. I make
You're
her
like,
ashes.
"Excuse me?"
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
That's an
It's
awful,
bizarre.
awful story. And
Yeah.
it makes you wish that the locals there, who I would assume some of them ended up being your friends to some
Yeah.
extent,
Yeah.
they kept saying, "Don't talk about it." Well, can't you talk about it enough to tell me to, to help us or to,
Yeah. It was just bizarre. And I really loved living there. I really liked it. I mean, I'm so into the UFO thing. I went to the crash site. I talked to people, that were had like their parents were alive when the crash happened. Oh, my dad heard all about that, blah blah blah. And it was just so cool living there. It was such a neat little place. And I don't know, I'd like to go back again maybe, but I don't think it's really gonna happen.
Yeah, maybe it's
Um,
best not to. I can't
yeah,
imagine I'd be very happy to drive around there and just drag those
go to the old
memories up.
houses.
And
Oh no,
yeah,
no, not
no,
a good idea.
I
Yeah,
think not. Cool place. It's cool that they embrace it. It's smart to do
yep,
that, just like the
yep.
inn that you talked about. And again, I will
Oh yeah,
link that video so that everybody
yeah, yeah.
can watch that. But Mark, I really truly appreciate you being willing to share your experiences.
Sure, absolutely cool. Well, Shannon, it's been awesome being on your show. I've done other shows before, but and I think yours one of the best.
Cool.
You and After the Shadows, I love you guys. I listen to all
Oh
your
my
stuff.
gosh,
Believe me,
love
I
those
watch you. I
guys.
watch you on Small Town Monsters all the time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I am a huge fan of Small Town Monsters. Yeah, Seth and Alex. Oh my God, they're great, man. It's like they're it's like I feel like I know them even though I've never met them.
Yeah, and a huge congrats to Seth and Courtney. They just got married.
Yeah, I
So,
know.
yeah, so
That's
just
great.
a nice little shout out to them. A big congrats if anybody wants to go hunt down some of those posts and tell them congratulations. But, Mark, thanks a
Yep.
million. If I know that you're going to keep collecting these encounters, so please get back in touch when you have a few more and you want to share some
Oh,
maybe
I
that you
have many
didn't
more.
share
Sure.
today. I would love to have you back.
Awesome, Shannon. Thank you so much.